Hi, everyone. It's Leslie and Coach LeAnne to talk with you again this afternoon or tonight, wherever you are. It's this afternoon for us. It's tonight for many of you on the East Coast. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just let us know that you're live before we get started because we have a really important topic to talk about tonight. And we really want to make sure you're able to be present with us. So those of you on YouTube and those of you on Facebook, hello, hello, hello. Let us know that you're here. I see someone from YouTube. Thank you for letting us know you're here. And I think someone's coming through from Facebook. Yeah, there you go. Kathy, hi. Good to see you, Lorraine. Yeah, hi, Teresa. Good to see you, Lorianne. You guys are the faithful ones. Every Facebook Live, you're here, and I so appreciate you. I feel like I'm getting to know you. We'll have to meet for coffee sometime if you're ever in the Phoenix area. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome, welcome. Today we're talking about the difference between fear-based love or fear-based relationships and freedom-based relationships. And LeAnne and I were just chatting for a little bit beforehand so we could make sure we're on the same page. But we would love to hear from you. We're going to talk about 3 different types of relationships tonight. We're going to talk about your relationship with God. What does it look like to have a freedom-based relationship with God versus a fear-based relationship? And we're not talking about a reverential fear. We're talking about, I'm scared of God. He's going to clobber me if I get out of line relationship. Okay, so fear-based relationship versus a freedom-based relationship with God. What does it look like to have a fear-based relationship with yourself versus a freedom-based relationship for yourself? And what does it look like to have a fear-based relationship with others, especially maybe someone you're struggling with right now, versus a freedom to love-based relationship? Is there a key difference that you've noticed when you feel free to love versus you feel afraid in the relationship? What stands out to you? We'd love to hear from you.
We would. Hi, Patricia and Susan, Christine. So glad that you're here, Carol Sue. It's so beautiful to see you all coming in, and we appreciate your hellos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
Dawn.
Leslie, I just really appreciate how you dove right in to the 3 key relationships in our lives. And so, what are we going to do with those? We have some choices, ladies, tonight. We would love to hear from you. What do you think about fear versus freedom? Lots of hellos and highs.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's even hard to define. So maybe we can start there. What does it mean to you to love in freedom? And what does it mean for you to love someone in fear? And we're not talking about necessarily fear of danger fear, but fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of, what anxiety with fear bases joy with freedom. So it feels different, doesn't it? Like when you are filled with anxiety, like, oh, what if they don't like me? Or what if they don't like what I have to say? Or what if they're going to reject me? It's all kind of self-focused, isn't it? And when we can be not afraid of their rejection, we can be free to love well without worrying about that, huh? To be accepted, is that to be accepted and that's a fear-based relationship? We're afraid that we won't be accepted? Or is there a freedom when we are accepted to be ourselves? Mm-hmm.
So good. Thank you for putting that out there. I was doing some studying, and let's see, something that I was reading was, one of our most fundamental needs that we have is belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It's that desire to belong. And one of our biggest fears is loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of those key 3 relationships, did I say that right? Three key relationships. I want to be able to be comfortable in my own skin. I want to be able to belong to myself in a way that is comfortable and nourishing, where I
Mm-hmm.
can flourish.
Yep.
Right. And that's important to me. I want to be feeling safe in my relationship with God, that I can bring Him everything and that I belong to Him. I want to know that full well. I want to not only know it in my head, but I want to know it in my heart. And then the key people in my life, the folks that I care about the most, I want to belong to them. I want to belong with them. And I
Mm-hmm.
also, I don't want to be feeling lonely in a room full of people. So I can see that that's resonating with our group. It's pure giving without expectation back. Authenticity. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because fear can take many forms: loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being loved.
Mhm. What would it be like? Faith says it's pure giving without expectation back. What would it be like for you to love like that? What would you need inside in order to be able for you to be able to love without expecting them to like what you do, approve of what you do, thank you for what you do? What would it be like for you just to be able to give the love that you want to give when you want to give it and pull back when you need to pull back? What would it be like for you to have the freedom to love and give and serve as God calls you, and to rest and regroup and refresh as you feel need to without feeling afraid? What would that be like for you? Yeah, what would it be like? Put it in the chat.
I'd love to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like I have just been given, Fort Knox. It would be so much gold. It would be, I would have this endless flow coming into me so that I could pour out to others. It would be almost really supernatural. I would need the Holy Spirit and a whole lot of Jesus.
Okay, yeah, you're saying you're getting it. It would be incredible. It would be like heaven. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow night, or not tomorrow night, Thursday night at our workshop, because this is what God desires for us. He desires us to live in freedom. It says in Galatians, "For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters. Don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Use your freedom to serve others in love." What would it be like if you just had freedom, that you weren't worried about how they received it, how they felt about it? You just could love out of your authentic best self, and you could serve and take care of you, all of those, because you were also loving yourself. So you'd have boundaries and all of that, but you're not fearful of how they will take it or how they receive it or whether they do or they don't, that you're free to give it. Just like, hey, would you like a cookie? Would you like a cookie? Would you like a cookie? And some will say yes and some will say no. And I just enjoyed baking them and I can enjoy giving them. And I'm not hurt and rejected if you don't want one. What would that be like for you?
Leslie, that really speaks, what the word that's coming up for me is autonomy.
Yes, yes. Autonomy, the freedom to not be controlled by another person's opinion, by another person's rejection. That's critical if you want to be a healthy person. Jesus was free to give, and he was free not to give. He walked away, he went to sleep, he rode out in the boat by himself. He was free to give, and people took and people didn't take. People loved, people didn't love. People believed, people didn't believe. And it didn't affect who he was. He wasn't loving in fear. He was loving in freedom. And God wants that for us too. And what does it take to get there? What does it take to get there? Yeah. This is something that LeAnne was talking about. We have a need to belong, and we also have a need to be authentic and to be autonomous. We have both, and this is where fear-based comes. This is where the fear. So these are both needs that we have. We do need to belong, and we do need to be ourselves if we're going to be mature. But here's where the fear comes in. If we have to give up this in order to belong, then that's a fear-based relationship.
Yeah, so good.
If we have to stop being our authentic self in order for you to love me or accept me or like me or want me, then I've just erased me. I haven't loved me. I haven't been me. I haven't been true to me in order for me to belong to you. Whether it's in a marriage or in a church or in a club, if I'm not free to be me and belong, then it's an unhealthy belonging attachment. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because this is what we do a lot. This is why we're in unhealthy, destructive relationships, because we have not loved ourselves enough to be ourselves and belong. We've tried to be what you want me to be to belong. We've sacrificed our authenticity to belong, and that's a fear-based relationship.
Leslie, that's so powerful. And, I've talked to women a lot. And as we get to the root, when we're expressing and exploring fear and love and freedom and belonging, oftentimes the women will share, I feel like I'm being erased in my relationships. And so when you took your finger and, took away that, what
Mhm.
a powerful image. And it can happen over time. And we don't even know that our authenticity is gone
Yes.
until all of a sudden one day we're like, what in the world happened to me?
Yes. I
And
am I am just a blank. I'm
yep.
a blank check that someone can write on and take whatever they want. I'm not a person anymore. I'm a possession. I'm an object to use. And that isn't God's will for you. That's not loving yourself. That's not being filled with God's love for you. It's trying to be what someone calls you to be in order to belong. And that's the essence of a fear-based relationship. Yes, we want to belong, but you want to belong as you, right? You want to belong as you, not as what they need you to be in order for you to be acceptable to them. But we do that. We become chameleons, don't we? We're like those little colorful lizards that if you're on a tree, I'll be a tree. If you're on a stick, I'll look like a stick. If you're on a candy bar, I'll be a chocolate cake. I mean, we just switch whoever we are in order to belong to the women group we want to be part of, to the Bible study we want to be part of, to the marriage we want to be part of, to our parents' expectations of us, to our kids' expectation of us, instead of being who we are. What's that about? What is the fundamental problem with us as women? That we're so divorced from who God made us to be and so unwilling to nourish and nurture that and instead try to morph into what others want us to be. What do you think the fundamental lie is that we as women believe? That we're not willing to just be our full authentic self. Like, not everybody likes sunflowers, but if God made you to be a sunflower, and you will belong to the gardener who loves sunflowers, right? Not the one who doesn't. But instead we say, oh, you don't like sunflowers? Well, maybe I could be a tulip. Let me try to be a tulip for you, right? And then we erase that to belong. And we live in fear. Because what if they find out we're not really tulips? Or we just can't keep it up? Becoming a tulip is exhausting if you're not supposed to be a tulip. Right? It's exhausting.
It is. And I think, sometimes a lot of it, at least for me, I can just speak from my own experience. I'll speak from my own experience. Insecurity of not even really knowing who I am and not being, like I shared at the beginning, comfortable in our own skin, having a relationship with myself and really knowing me. And so that whole idea of self-awareness, self-love in a healthy way, self-confidence, even that self-control, I love when we think about the fruits of the spirit, one of those is self-control. And self-control embodies a whole big picture when it comes to fear and freedom.
Yeah, you can't even have self-control. I mean, let's just think about this realistically, physically. If you want to control your bladder, if you're learning as a little kid to control your bladder so that you don't wet your pants anymore, you need a couple steps before that. First, you have to become self-aware, like, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom. And then you have to become self-ability to reflect, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom really, really bad, like right now, right? Not just, oh, I have this little tinkle feeling, but I've got to go and I'm going to pee my pants unless I have the ability to go somewhere else and learn to go in the. So those steps before self-control is that self-awareness and that self-reflection and the self-examination so that I have choices to make. I can now know I don't have to go now, but I can go over here and I can control this for so long until I can go here, right? And so these are developmental milestones for any little child, but they're also mental, emotional, developmental milestones for you as a grown-up. What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? What do I love? What do I hate? What brings life to my soul? What drains me dry? And again, doesn't mean you get everything you want or you can do everything you want, but if you don't know those things, you might get yourself into a situation where you are drained dry all the time and you don't know why, because you haven't done the work. And what is it about ourselves that we get so mad at and that we don't like? And we reject ourselves before anybody else rejects us.
Oh boy.
We start to reject ourselves. We don't belong to ourselves.
It's so true. And, if we don't even know who it is that God created us to be, if we don't like ourselves, if we despise ourselves, and then we're looking for that approval and the validation and the acceptance from everybody else around us, instead of first coming home, I call it coming home to myself. If until we do that, there is a disconnect between who we are and even who we say we are. We can say a lot of things about, I want this and I want that. I desire this. I don't want that. But if we're not living it, embodying it, nourishing and cultivating the gifts that God has given us, then we're going to end up desperate. We're going to end up grabbing for love in all the wrong places. And that comes out of fear.
LeAnne, Jennifer said something really powerful that I would love to bring out. You said, what I love about the sunflower tulip example is that it isn't always about pretending to be more or pretending to be bigger than we are. Sometimes it's pretending to be smaller than we are. And I think this is critical for women. I don't think men have big of an issue of pretending they're smaller than they are. But what if you've been given some amazing gifts of leadership and strength, and that threatens your husband? Right? And then you're supposed to dumb it down. Like women in seminary have been told, hey, don't show off. Men aren't going to like you. Nobody's going to want to marry you. Like, what? Like, I can't be me. I can't be strong. I can't be big, or I won't be valued or loved, or I can't belong as a Christian woman if I use all my strengths or develop the gifts that God has given me. But I think that's the message that many of us have felt growing up in the Christian church. Yeah, we're
threatening. Yeah, threatening. And, other women, we can do it to each other. We can get jealous and nitpicky and, possessive and controlling. And so, just like your question earlier, what would be different if we were free to love without that jealousy, without the control, without, oh my goodness, that threatening thought process?
Yeah. Maritza says, I feel like I need to come home to myself. And I think we all do. Your husbands do too. We all do, because we can't love in freedom if we're always afraid of rejection. And the rejection starts by rejecting ourselves. And so we have to come home to ourselves and understand we're not perfect selves. Nobody is, right? Nobody is. But to come home to ourselves, to know ourselves, so that we can freely love others, because we're not looking for someone to fill us up. We're not looking for someone else to define us or approve of us. We know who we are. We know who God made us to be. And it's limited. It's finite. It's not perfect, because God hasn't created any perfect human beings. After Adam and Eve were all somewhat messed up and broken. But we're not going to become what you want in order for you to love me. That's a fear-based relationship.
It is. Leslie, I love that you're bringing this up. And I want to give a shout out to our community here on Facebook and on YouTube. The love and support that you bring one another, and your vulnerability is so inspiring. And, there, 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love. And it goes on to say, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. And oh my goodness, I don't know about y'all, but fear and love walking together, they don't walk together very well. They're kind of incompatible. All right. And so fear-based love, we're going to be worrying all the time about punishment, about rejection. And that could be from God. That can be in our relationship vertically, as well as our relationship inwardly. Not to mention the horizontal relationships that we have. And so, I want to be defined by the one who created me, and his love is the only perfect love. And it can drive out the fear if we invite him in.
Well, and this is really crucial, ladies. So we're going to be doing a workshop on Thursday night. Most of you know about it. Most of you already signed up, so it's fine. But we're going to be talking about, because the last thing I want you to do is to say, oh, this relationship is abusive, I'm going to break up with this person, or I'm going to get divorced. And you don't do your own work.
That's right.
You don't do your own work because you've been in this fear-based relationship. for how many years? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And you've got some of your own work to do now, your own healing. Because if you just go out from that relationship and you haven't healed yourself, you're going to look for another person to define you, and you're going to look for another person to fill you up, and you're going to look for another person to take care of you. And we talked about this morning, who's responsible for you? Who's responsible for your happiness, your safety, your well-being, and your growth? Who's responsible for you? Right? Put it in the chat. Who's responsible for you?
That's a powerful question.
Right? Because once you own that, well, then you've got some work to do to live in that. Because we keep looking for others to make us happy, to fulfill us. And Hollywood and Harlequin sort of feed that myth. There is no person who's going to fulfill you and make you happy. Even the best husbands are flawed and imperfect. And even the best wives aren't going to fulfill him and make him happy. That's not it. Me. Who's responsible for you? You. Your husband's not responsible. He can't fill your love tank, and you can't fill his. You see, when we live with an empty tank or with a tank with a hole at the bottom of it, the other person's maybe trying real hard and it never sticks because we're looking for them to take care of us and our emotional needs. And it's our responsibility. That doesn't mean people don't love us and we don't enjoy that, but they're not going to ever complete you or fulfill you. And if we believe that lie, we keep looking for someone else and we're always disappointed. We become very demanding and very unhappy because someone's not capable of that. They can't be responsible for our well-being. Ultimately, that's our job. Can they contribute to it? Yeah. But if they're contributing to it in a negative way, who's responsible for our safety? We are. Yeah. Right? And so if someone is treating you abusively in an unsafe way and you keep allowing it, then what are you saying about your relationship with yourself? Like, I'm not important. I don't value myself. That's the unhealthy piece of you that has to help grow. Even if your marriage doesn't make it, don't waste this horrible experience. Let it teach you something. And we're going to unpack all that in the workshop. So I hope you have signed up. I hope you have cleared out your schedule to actually attend live. I think it'll be much more helpful than just watching the replay because the interaction in the chat, as you see today, like LeAnne said, the community is powerful. And when you get, a couple hundred women on the chat, it's going to be powerful both for you to feel not alone and not crazy because a lot of women are in the same boat you are.
It's amazing how we can finish each other's sentences in this space right here. And then the workshop goes even deeper. And then just the gift that you give of a Q&A afterwards is so powerful. And so I just want to, ditto what Leslie said. The title of the workshop is, If He Doesn't Hit You, Is It Still Abuse? God Cares. And so go to leslievernick.com/join workshop and reserve your seat. You will be so glad that you did. Leslie, when you were talking about, and a lot of women answered, I'm responsible for myself. Absolutely. That is the right answer. That is the good church girl answer. That's the great Facebook Live answer. It is. It's so right on. And how many of us have turned over the responsibility for our well-being to somebody else? We have given them so much power over how we spend our time, our energy, our resources, our thoughts, because we don't want to put forth the effort to take care of ourselves. Sometimes it's easier just to say, you just do it all. You know what? We talk with women all day long who are exhausted. Maybe you're one of them who are exhausted from trying to do it all and doing it all in your own strength.
And maybe he expects you to do it all. And so you're afraid that if you don't, and you have some boundaries and you say, no, I can't. And that's not what I want to do. And I don't want to spend my time this way. He's going to be upset. He's going to be angry with you. He's going to be disappointed in you. He's going to call you names, and he just might if he's unhealthy, for sure. Right? Because he's got some unhealthy beliefs as well. And this is where This is the only chance you have to begin to switch things around, even in your relationship with someone, is for one of you to get healthy. He's unhealthy in his way, we're unhealthy in our way. Okay, he might be the taker, you might be the giver, but when a relationship is so lopsided that way, it's unhealthy. And so you need to learn to get healthy. But how do you get healthy and love with freedom and not hate and resent him once you start to get healthy and say what a jerk he is? Right? That's the dilemma. As our women in our population start to get their eyes open and say, oh my gosh, he has been controlling. He is an abuser, and God doesn't expect me to live like this. It's very easy to let the enemy come in and fill you with bitterness. He's ruined my life. He's ruined my kid's life. And you can be full of hate and resentment. Legitimately, I understand.
Yep.
But that's not where God wants you to stay. You might be there for a season. But if you're to learn to love in freedom, what does it look like to love your enemy? He might feel like your enemy. You might not be able to stay married to him. You might not be able to live with him, at least for now. But God still wants you to love. What does that look like to love in freedom? You don't need anything from him. You don't need a relationship with him. You don't need him to approve of you. But what does it look to love and not hate in those moments is going to be critical for your healing, even if your marriage doesn't make it. Yeah.
So good. These thought-provoking questions, these are really reflective, my friends. And so I hope that y'all have something to write with and something to write on, because what we're, offering up is an opportunity for you to make a different choice on how it is you approach even your evening tonight. We've got a new month. Hello, October. We've got a new week. Hello, Monday. And we have an opportunity for a mindset shift on Thursday with this workshop. And one verse that I think about a lot, Leslie, when it comes to how do I know to walk into freedom? How do I know how I'm going to shake fear off a little bit and leave it to the side, is reminding me 2 Timothy 1:7. For the Spirit of God, the Spirit that God gave us does not make us timid. It does not make me afraid. It gives me power, love, and I don't know, self-discipline, self-confidence, or self-control is coming up a lot tonight, because we have choices whether or not we walk in fear or freedom, but it takes us doing our own work and peeling back some layers to see it. And fear is often linked with timidity, my friends, and a lack of self-control. Because when I've been fearful, that's when I tend to yell or overshare, over serve, over people please, over everything out of fear. And love should empower you and offer up some self-discipline and self-control. So I just thought I'd add that.
Yeah. And if we go back to our chart, I don't know if I have an eraser here. Let's go back to just one more little piece, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. So if we've talked about this before, you've heard me say this lots of times. So we have internal stuff, like what's going on with me? What are my feelings? What are my body saying? What am I thinking? And then we have external stuff, which is my marriage, my husband, my kids, my money situation, my, living situation. So oftentimes we think and we believe that I need this to be good in order for me to be happy. Like I need my husband to love me in order for me to be okay. I need him to stop cheating in order for me to be okay. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't want him to stop cheating. We should, all right? Not only for your benefit, but for his. But if you need that with a big old capital N in order for you to be happy, then you're in a fear-based relationship, because he's never going to, if he never does that, then what happens to you? So what the Lord says in Galatians 5, we're in Timothy, that God has not given us a spirit internally of fear, but of love and of power and of sound mind. It says in Galatians 5 that the fruit of the flesh is obvious. It's demanding, it's controlling, it's fear-based, it's sinful. But the fruit of the Spirit is internal. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. That's a freedom-based love. That's all in you from God's Spirit who's inside of you. He lives inside of your heart. Your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Imagine how your body would feel if you were not dependent on this for you to be okay. But if you were dependent on the fruit of the Spirit, that I have everything I need. I have love. I have joy. I have peace. Unless your peace is dependent on this, right? But if your peace is dependent on God, then I have everything I need. And I can love. I might not be able to have a relationship with this person because they're dangerous or they're harmful, but I can still love them. I can pray for them. I can seek their good. And I can be free to also have really good boundaries around them because they're dangerous, just like Jesus loved everybody. He didn't trust everybody. He loved everybody and he escaped those from who were trying to harm him. So it's not like, oh, I love you and you can just do anything you want to me, because that's not loving them, to give them access to harm you, right? Because that's only going to hurt them. But what would it be like for you if what God said was true? If you could believe what God says and break up with some old beliefs that I need this to be okay. This is where God, this world is not our home, right? So if we need this to be okay, we're living in this world in order for our happiness to exist. And God says, you can try that, but it's like building your house on sand. When the storms come and this external world is not very stable these days, you're going to collapse. Or your marriage is unstable, you're going to collapse. And so what would it be like for you to get strong and healthy so that you could love yourself, God, and others in freedom? That's our challenge.
So beautiful. So beautiful. And we do have some questions, Leslie.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and I just love the words that said the fruit of the Spirit is internal. I can hear that I see all those exclamation points as you type that into the chat. Yeah, it is so, so good. And reminding that, if you don't know Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, please reach out to us. We would love to share a conversation with you, because that's where freedom starts. That, and without Jesus and the deposit of the Holy Spirit in your life, we cannot be fully free, no matter what our relationship status is.
Yeah. Faith, you're absolutely right. Sometimes hate is easier.
It is.
Than dealing with the sadness. It is. Because hate gives you a little bit more energy, right? Like that gives you a little bit more energy than just pure grief, right? So yes, it is easier. But take it to the next level and move to anger, which is where your hate's coming from. And anger's legitimate, but it gives you more energy than the sadness. And then take it to the next level, which is forgiveness. And then take it to the next level, which is love, right? So it's not like we go from sadness to love. We take our steps through that journey. And you're right, hate is a better place to be than despair, right? But you don't want to stay in hate. So move yourself through and understand you're angry, you're hurt, you're angry. You have every reason to be angry. And what do you need to learn from that anger so that you can set good boundaries so it doesn't keep repeating? And then how do you forgive so that you're not a prisoner of your hate and anger, legitimate as they are, right? Absolutely. It will harm you if you keep it too long. It serves a purpose. Just as your sadness, it all serves a purpose. So we're not just trying to ignore it. We want to work ourselves through it. That's what a healthy person does. They don't pretend, they don't lie, they don't act like they don't feel those feelings. They do. I had a good friend who was really harmed by someone, and she said, I hate them so much, I feel like I could kill them. Now, she wasn't going to kill them, but that's how much she hated them. And I love that she could be honest enough with herself and with me as her friend to say right where she was. But she didn't want to stay there. You wouldn't want to stay there either. It's a horrible place to be. And so get the help you need to move from there to there to there to there in that healing journey, in that growing journey. That is God's will for you.
Well, and sometimes it's just really a step at a time. And sometimes those steps, we need others to walk alongside of us as we take those steps, because it's rocky ground. And so, yeah, sign up for the workshop. You'll be so glad that you did. There's going to be a community of women there that get you and that will walk with you.
No judgment. Yeah, no judgment. So
Yep.
this is the freedom to be where we are, authentic, and still belong. Like I'm in hate right now and I still belong and I don't want to be here, but here's where I am. Right. And so this is a community where you can be where you are and belong, no judgment, but we do want to help you think about, hey, let's not stay here too long because it's like walking through the valley of the shadow of death, right? You don't want to hang out there for years and years and years, right? It might be weeks and weeks and weeks until you can move to the next level, but we're moving you. We want to help you get healthy and whole. And God wants that for you too.
He does. And that goes into our next question, or our first question, Leslie. It says, how do you know if you're living in fear? How do you know if you're living in fear?
I think you feel it.
You feel it from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. There's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of dependency on other people.
And your heart beats fast.
Super fast.
And your armpits sweat. And you feel very nervous and anxious about the future and about yourself and about whether you're accepted or loved or going to make it. That's living in fear. Anxiety is a different word for it, but it's still living in fear. Uncertainty, nervousness.
Thoughts, a lot of hopelessness. Very fear-based. You know, I have an acronym for fear, and this might help this listener right now into the space, but you're going to know that you're walking in fear if you want to forget it all and run the other way. So you forget everything and run. That's one acronym for fear. Yeah. And if you are more love-based, you're going to face everything and rise above with the Lord and not run away from it. So that could be another symptom of living in fear.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. And we all feel it. That's why the Bible says more about fear as far as an emotional issue than any other emotion, because we're all going to feel it. Fear is entered into our spirits as soon as we sinned. Adam and Eve felt afraid. They recognized they were naked. They were afraid. They were ashamed. They ran. They hid. Right? It was right at the beginning. And God cared about them. And he said, and I'm reading through Genesis, so it's fresh in my mind. He goes, where are you? Like God didn't know where they were, right? He knew where they were, but they didn't know where they were, right? That's that self-awareness. Wow, what have I done? Wow, where am I? I'm in a different space. I'm naked. I'm aware. I'm ashamed of this. I wasn't that way before, but now I am now, right? And he didn't condemn them or beat them up. He just said, you need to pay attention to where you are so that we can move from that space. But you can't move until you know and admit it.
Right. Well, and another way that we know that we're living in fear is that there's a lot of unhealthy dynamics in your relationship.
Yeah.
And so we just want to bring that forward and not, skirt around that issue. And, oftentimes there's a lot of emotional manipulation, and that could be you manipulating your own emotions and denying them and not feeling them, numbing them out, or it could be others manipulating your emotions as well.
Yeah, at the workshop, we're going to be talking about what are the 4 components of an abusive relationship or even an abusive system, a toxic system, whether it's a church or a cult. They all look the same if you really unpack it at the root. So we're going to look at that so that you can kind of see, are we just, kind of cranky with each other, or is this really an abusive system that I'm in, an abusive, toxic relationship? And I think there's a lot of organizations, Christian organizations, that have a lot of toxic and abusive elements to their system as well. And I think it's important that as women, especially when we're going to church leaders for help with some destructive elements of our relationship, that we can tell, is this a safe church or is this also a toxic system? And so I'll be unpacking that for you during the workshop. You're also going to get a workbook. I want you to download that ahead of time. It's going to be kind of long because I'm not going to be able to go through every single verse I want you to look up later, but it'll be something that you can use later for your own study and for your own growth. So please sign up and make every effort to attend live because it'll make a difference in the experience that you have with it and the information. Okay.
I love that. And you know what, my friends, as you're listening to Leslie share, Leslie, you're just so generous with all that you give and bring to the table. And maybe you know somebody who would really benefit from this workshop. And you can forward them this Facebook Live and they can hear more about it, or you can invite them to watch this with you. This is a
Mhm,
free workshop.
mhm,
And so maybe you know somebody that has some questions around fear and freedom.
mhm, mhm.
Reach out. There might be a woman in your neighborhood that is waiting for a phone call or a let's
Mhm,
have coffee, let's watch this together because
mhm.
I'm confused and
Yeah.
I don't fully get it. If
Mhm.
1 in 4 women are impacted by destructive relationships, chances are one of your girlfriends is.
Yeah.
And she may just not talk about it. She may be asking herself this question that's on the screen on a regular basis. If he doesn't hit me, how can I say that it's abusive?
And so we'll tell you how you can say it on the workshop. How will you know that it's abusive? There's a different element to look for, not the hitting. Also, Maritza says, I feel paralyzed, like I'm not sure which way to turn. Is this fear? So you could label it indecision, but here's where I would like you to think about. So if I turn right, what am I afraid of? If I turn left, what am I afraid of? What's paralyzing your decision making? It might be you're afraid of making a mistake or afraid of doing something wrong, like God will be mad at you. So kind of play it out a little bit, like take those steps and then what? Imagine them taking them steps. What are you afraid of? Being wrong, not doing it right, getting in God's, God disappointed in you, making someone else mad, being rejected. What are you afraid of if you take, what's paralyzing you? Why is it so hard for you to make a step? That will help you to understand what you're afraid of or if you're afraid, right? Okay.
Absolutely. So good. Do you want me to read the next
Yeah,
questions?
yeah.
All right. How do I respond to a controlling and abusive spouse when he asks me to go to marriage counseling after having done individual counseling for so long, but he is still explosive and controlling? I told him I don't feel safe or that we're in a healthy place to do marriage counseling. And he says, my feelings are subjective. And I had agreed to it before with our pastor.
Well, so I would stick up for yourself. If you don't want to go, don't go. He's not going to like it. And here's where you have to learn to love him well and say, we're going to have a difference of opinion here that you'd like to go, but I still feel like you're trying to control me. And I need for me to make a decision. And whether or not you like it or not or approve of it, I'm going to still stand by my no until I feel it's the right time for me. This is really a test for you to see if he's learned anything in counseling about himself, right? Because if he is so controlling and he wants to micromanage your decisions, by you loving him enough to say, hey, this has been a pattern in our relationship where you expect that I always do what you want. And I'm not willing to do that anymore. I need to be me and I need to be able to say, no, I'm not ready for this. So you don't have to say he needs to change anything, but I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready to start this process yet. And see if he can be disappointed without being controlling, right? So he could be legitimately disappointed, like, I really thought we were ready for this and you don't feel ready. Shucks, that makes me disappointed. But if he gives you the guilt trip and manipulates you or pressures you or bullies you, I would just say, hey, one of the things that I was hoping you would work on in your individual counseling is this controlling behavior. I see it again. I'm not willing to be controlled. You're not God for me. And see what happens. Oh, but you're supposed to, they're going to say all these things, and we're going to talk quite a bit about this in the workshop. So please attend. But this is a very common part of an abusive relationship is this control over, and so it's really important if you want to be healthy that you resist his control over you. That doesn't mean you never submit. Submission's a great discipline, but submission isn't just for women or for wives, and we'll unpack that all during the workshop. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, it's so helpful. All right, here's another question. Thank you for reminding us that we should not give up who we are to gain the love and acceptance of others. I agree it is unhealthy and so defeating to deny who we are in order to keep others happy and gain their approval. Where I get stuck in holding to this idea is with my kids. I am trying to be more authentic with them and not be fearful of their rejection. However, they say they are rejecting me because I am not accepting their dad for who he is. They would say I'm being hypocritical by wanting them to accept me for who I am when I won't accept their dad. I don't know what to think when they say things like this. I know I can't stay with my husband who continues to be abusive. Am I being hypocritical? If not, how do I make sense of all of this?
It is kind of crazy making, isn't it?
Ooh.
Because they're using similar language, but you're not defining the same things. Okay, so I think you are accepting him as he is. You just don't want to live with him as he is. And there's a difference, right? So you're not trying to change him. You're not saying you can't be who you are. I think you can say, I accept who you are. You are a man who, has a short fuse. You're whatever his abuse is. I don't know. You're a man who has a short fuse. You're a man who feels it's fine to hit your wife. You're a man who, wants to lie if you get caught with something or whatever he is. You don't have to say all that out loud. And I think you can say to your kids, I absolutely do accept Dad who he is. I just can't live with him. I just can't live with him who he is because I don't feel safe. That's why I do accept who he is. And I'm not trying to change him. But I don't believe that God's calling me to live in a situation where I feel unsafe and I'm getting harmed because I believe that God calls me to steward me. And I can't steward me well when your dad treats me the way he does. I totally accept him. I don't have any hatred toward him. I don't have any ill will. I just can't live with him anymore. It's sick. It's toxic for me. So I think that's the difference. And, to be able to say that and let your kids decide, wow, am I going to reject you? Because you're not rejecting him. You're saying, I can't live with him. If you can, and he's willing to be a safe person, you can attend birthday parties together if you want to. You could attend grandchildren birthday parties together or Christmas together or a wedding. If one of your children gets married, you can show up. You're not going to show up as a couple, but maybe you can show up in a loving, kind, gracious way and treat him as a, person created in the image of God without saying his behavior is good and right and you can live with him. I think this is the issue, is that I'm not willing to act as if his behavior is acceptable to me when he harms me, but I accept that he believes it is, right? Or he's fine with not changing and I accept that, but I don't want to live with it. And I think that's the difference. And I think there's lots of people that I wouldn't want to live with, that I could be friends with, that I could accept who they are, but whether they're too messy or too neat or whatever it is, I might not be able to live with them, but I could certainly accept who they are, right? And so I think this is your children are saying, and you might ask them a question. So are you saying that I have to let Dad treat me as he's treated me, that I'm not allowed to steward myself? That means I'm not accepting him? I am accepting him. It's sort of like Jesus accepted Judas, right? He accepted who Judas was. And Judas went off and he didn't go after Judas and say, wait a minute, we need to have this close relationship. We just let Judas do what he was going to do. He accepted him. Or even the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler said, what do I need to do to have a relationship with you? And Jesus said, you need to do this, this, this. And rich young ruler said, no, I don't want to do that. And he said, okay. He accepted him. And it says, and he loved him. And he let him go. So those might be a couple of examples from scripture that you could use to say, I think acceptance doesn't necessarily mean that you're close friendship with someone or you're in a close relationship with them, especially if you can't trust them. You can still accept who they are. Any thoughts, LeAnne?
I have nothing to add. That was brilliant. It was so good. And acceptance doesn't mean that okay, I do have something to add. Acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with how it is they're treating you. That's not, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. It means you're settling, you're admitting to the truth of what's going on.
Right.
This is, I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to cover it up. I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm not going to put it under the rug. I'm not going to run away in fear. I'm going to have the freedom to see it and the relationship and this person for who they are. And I'm going to believe what it is they're showing me.
Yeah.
And, we don't have to, acceptance doesn't mean that you acquiesce who you are, that you dismiss yourself, that you hide the best in you to cover up the worst in someone else, that's not acceptance.
Right. Or approval. Here
Exactly.
would be another example. If I accept I have breast cancer, it doesn't mean I approve of it, I'm happy about it, or I like it, but I do accept it. And that leads me to my next step. Okay, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to get my breast lopped off? Am I going to get chemo? Am I going to do nothing? So once I accept the truth, I have some steps to take for my welfare, because I don't want to live with breast cancer. I want to get it out of me, right? And so if you've accepted that your husband is who he is, that doesn't mean you want to live with him. It may mean you don't. Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's a safety issue and a security issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if the relationship is not safe and you do not feel secure in that relationship, then you can have conversation. You have a choice to either, fall asleep and sleepwalk through life, or you have a choice to speak up and share what it is that is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, acceptance invites in powerful and courageous conversations. And Leslie, I love how you brought the paradigm shift in. There are two different ways of accepting who somebody is. And so thank you for clarifying that. And I bet that was super helpful for our listeners today.
And I think it'd be really interesting for you, whoever asked this question, to just have a conversation with your children instead of kind of declaring this, what we just talked about. I think it might be just helpful to have a conversation like, well, can you explain to me how you define acceptance? Because I think I'm getting a little confused. And then they might say, well, if you accepted dad, you wouldn't divorce him. You would just accept him for who he is and say, so you're saying that when you accept something, that sounds like approval to me. Like if I had breast cancer, I would accept I had breast cancer, but I still wouldn't want to live with it. I would have to get it out. So what do you mean by like, I would accept dad? I do accept dad. That's why I can't live with him. I'm not going to change him. And I accept he wants to be the way he is. He doesn't want to get the help. He doesn't want to change, whether he's an alcoholic or whatever it is that he's doing. I accept that. And I don't have any resentment, or I don't want to punish him, or I don't want to hurt him, but I don't want to live with him. What does that sound like to you? Like, I'm not accepting. I'm not clear. And so just put it on their side of the street to define what it looks like, or at least have a conversation about it, so that maybe through that conversation, they might say, you know what, I think we are putting a burden on you to approve or to tolerate. This acceptance means tolerate, and acceptance doesn't mean tolerate, right? And I think that's what they're saying. If you accepted that, then you would tolerate him, that you would allow him to be in your life without any boundaries. And I think that's what they're defining acceptance. I don't think that's the true definition of acceptance. So it might be worth having a conversation. Acceptance doesn't mean tolerance. If I accept that someone has kidnapped my child, that means I call the police and I take action. That doesn't mean I tolerate that and it's okay with me, right? It means I accept reality is harsh and ugly right now, and I've got to take action, right?
Indeed. And, having the courage to have those curious conversations with someone, perhaps the children haven't even thought about what they mean when they're saying hypocritical, what they mean when it says acceptance. And so when you can have the courage to have those conversations, it's amazing the connection that can happen and the awareness for everybody. But if we're too afraid, if we're walking in fear and not letting love be the driver, we're not going to have those conversations, Leslie, because we're going to be too afraid.
Right.
So it really gives us an opportunity to get clear on what we mean, so that we can have those conversations that are the most meaningful.
And even inviting your children in love. Hey, I'd love to have a conversation about this. I see this really upsets you. And not worrying about how they handle it or how they receive it, because you're offering love and an example of openness. And, again, you're not going to agree, but maybe there's some light that's shed on it as you have that conversation. We've got one more question, and then I am going to go play pickleball tonight.
Good for you. I have Bible study tonight. You have pickleball. So I have been
sitting for 8 hours today. I've got to get up and stretch myself. So I have a friend who's separated and filed for divorce from her spouse that committed adultery. How does she respond when he demands she rescind the divorce paperwork or he's going to the church elders.
Oh, go to the church elders if they're safe.
Well, he's going to the church elders. So he's going to go tattle on her that she's what? Filed for divorce?
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Then you go know the reason why you're filing. You said that he committed adultery.
Mm-hmm.
So are you prepared to have that kind of a conversation, or will you run in fear away from that?
Yeah.
And so, you have a choice to make right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, how does she respond when he demands? How does she want to respond? Who does she want to be? And what kind of conversations does she want to have? And is the church a safe space? And I would also say she has an opportunity to bring a buddy with her no matter what. So having somebody else with skin on that holds safe space for her is going to be very, very important. And that might be you, because you said you have a friend who is separated and filed for divorce.
Mm-hmm.
What would you add, Leslie?
I think that's perfect. Other than I would just say, so he's committed adultery, and I don't hear anything in the sentence that he's really sorry or that he's repented, but he's somehow saying you're not allowed to file for divorce and you're bad. And if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to tattle on you. So that says a whole lot about much more than him just committing adultery. That's right. And it really tells you how toxic this relationship is. It's not just that he committed adultery. He's not owning it. He's not repenting it. And somehow now you're the bad person because you won't just forgive and get over it, right? Which is very common in an abusive relationship. So I would say come to the workshop and learn more about this, because this is where you have an opportunity to get healthy enough to say, I don't need your approval for the decisions I'm making, right? I'm going to love you and hold you accountable for your sin, not in a scolding, punishing way, but hey, I can't reconcile with someone who doesn't own his stuff, feels entitled to bully me and threaten me and intimidate me because I'm not willing to reconcile. You haven't even asked for forgiveness. You haven't owned your stuff. You're not, why would I want to be married to you? Now, I'm not saying you would say all that, but you certainly have to be strong enough to think that way. And if you're allowing him to bully and intimidate you, that's a fear-based, oh my gosh, the elders, they're going to know. And so that's not being strong. And I'm not saying that we all are always strong. I've allowed myself to get bullied and intimidated by church. I just got an email the other day that said, give me some reasons why women are misusing your material. It was kind of a little bullying itself. And I'm like, and I started like getting a little nervous. And I just said, I'm certainly willing to help your church if you want to tell me who you are and what church you're from, which I'm not sure there was any real church there. But all I'm saying is that I think that sometimes we can allow ourselves to get intimidated or bullied by someone and just pay attention. Like I paid attention. Wow, I'm feeling kind of scared from this comment. Why would I let this guy get under my skin? But it did for a little bit, right? So don't beat yourself up. Just pay attention. Notice. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I want to reach out to him in love and generosity, not in fear that he's going to be mad at me or he's going to badmouth me somewhere. He might do that. And then again, maybe he won't. And so if I can love in freedom and be generous, that's what I want to do. Whether he receives it or not, who knows? Who knows, right? So I think don't let yourself get bullied or intimidated. That's really important.
Right, because that's when fear takes over.
Right.
When all of that, and I think that when we're so reliant on a relationship to fill our emotional voids, and so no matter what it is that you're feeling, when all of this is going on, you can step more into love and let some of those insecurities go. And those unhealthy dynamics, when we step more into love, the unhealthy dynamics tend to not take up as much energy or space in your world when you choose to walk in love.
Okay, one more question, then we're going to be done because I am going to pick a ball. What if he is wanting to change and working on changing, and I'm not accepting that? I do accept it, but I'm not seeing the fruits as much as I need to. It's hard since he does want to change, but he isn't changing. So I feel like the bad guy in our situation, separated 2 years and not looking like we'll be reconciling on my end.
Yeah, well, good for him that he's wanting to change. Wanting to change and actually changing are two different things. It
Mhm.
takes work, and nobody is going to change if they do not invite in the Lord. I often think I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I think of the triangle, right? And so you're over here, your husband's over here, and the Lord is up top. And if you're both pursuing him, you're going to meet together. If you're not, it's really hard to come together. You're going to be on parallel points without
Mhm.
the Lord as your center. And so when you think about you're not accepting that he's wanting to change or working, only you are going to know what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with.
Mhm.
Change oftentimes doesn't happen overnight. We wish it would. You didn't get here overnight in a hard, destructive relationship, and it's not going to be repaired overnight. And only you're going to know how much you're comfortable with and
Mhm.
whether or not you can walk in love and not hate or fear with him. And so I can understand that you might feel like the bad guy or the bad girl.
But I think this is where I would challenge
That's
you. So what lie are you believing
right.
that makes you feel like the bad person, right? So there's a lie there that you really want to uncover. Like
Mhm.
somehow I'm supposed to be his cheerleader for his change. Can you do that? Can you, as the mother of your children, especially if he's the dad, if you have children together, can you say as a cheerleader or as a honest comment, I hope you really do change. I think it'd be great. What kind of changes do you want to make as a man for yourself? Oh, I want you to be happy with me. Well, what if I wasn't in the picture? What if I died tomorrow? What kind of man do you want to be? Let him decide, not because he's trying to win your affection back, because that's still fear-based love. I need you to approve of me. I need you to approve the changes I make. No, you don't get to define his changes. He gets to define his changes with him and the Lord. So I would just encourage that. Hey, what kind of changes do you feel like God's calling you to make? And I hope you make them. And I will be your biggest cheerleader. I want you to be the best dad that you could possibly be for our children. Whether or not I'll ever trust you again or want to be reconciled with you, I can't promise that. And why do you have to be a bad guy about that? Right? You can be loving. I love you as a person. I want your best. I want to see you grow and be all the man that God wants you to be, but I can't want that more for you than you. And I can't work on that. That's your job to do. And so I can pray for you and I will, and I can encourage you, and I am right now. I don't know if that I want to live with you because I don't know that I'll ever trust you again. That's the damage that's happened in our relationship because of these fits and starts for the last 20 years that you've said you're going to change and you never do. So I don't want you changing for me. I don't want you to change it for our marriage. I want you to change because you're convicted before the Lord that you're immature and that or whatever, and you need to change those things. And if you do, I will be your biggest cheerleader, but I don't know that I will be your wife. And I don't know that you would say all of that way out loud, but you've got to say that here because then you're not a bad guy at all. You're loving and supporting, and you're not in fear like, oh, that means I got to reconcile with him. You don't have to reconcile with him if you can't. But you can still honor the changes that he wants to make and encourage him to make them. But if he's doing it to win you back, obviously that's not enough. Right? It's not enough for anybody to sustain change. If I'm losing weight to fit into a dress, that's great until I fit into the dress, and then I'm eating my stuff again, right? Until I have to fit into the dress again. So it's not enough motivation. It's not internal. So if his motivation to change, here is here, my marriage, that's a very temporary motivation. It's just like if my motivation to eat healthy and lose weight is out here, like I want to look hot in my dress for the wedding or whatever, for the reunion, whatever event, as soon as the event's over with, I'm going to go back to my old eating habits. And so what you really want to communicate with him is support for if he really wants to make the changes, good for him. And I'd be so proud of you and I'd be happy to see you make those changes. I think you could be an awesome guy if you really wanted to work on those things. But you can't be his crutch, right? And if he's done some things that have really harmed you or the marriage where you feel unsafe with him or you're not sure those things are really going to happen, he's doing it because he wants to win you back, then to be more honest with him and say, I don't know that I'll ever trust you again. So don't change because of me. Change because of you, because you want to be a different man, because you're sick of the person you are, because you want to stand before the Lord and know that you've become the man that God's called you to be. Those would be your good motivations for changing, not for me. And if you said that in love, that might be a big splash of cold water for him to kind of be honest with himself. Maybe I really don't want to change at all. I was just trying to do it for you. And if you're not interested, I'm going to go find a woman who'll take me the way I am, which is often what happens with these men.
It is, because if the change is not internal, my friends, it's not sustainable. If it's external, it's just like putting a Band-Aid on until the next whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to answer one more question before we go. And that is, Colleen, you're asking a quick question. Is it biblical not to reconcile because we don't want to? I think reconciliation of a relationship has different levels depending on the level of relationship. A marriage is at the deepest level because there needs to be trust and safety. There doesn't need to be romantic love. Marriages were arranged in the Old Testament. They didn't love each other until they were married for a while and got to know each other. But if you don't have trust and safety for the foundation of your home, your walls will not stand, right? You can't live with someone, even a roommate, if you don't feel some trust and safety. If you feel like your roommate's, bringing drug addicts to the house or selling drugs out of the house or is going to harm you at night or does stuff to your, steals your stuff, you're not going to keep that roommate, right? And even if they're really sorry, you're probably not going to be a roommate for them because trust and safety has been violated, right? So once trust and safety has been violated in a relationship, I'm not saying that you can't be friends in a casual kind of way with someone and wish them well. But if someone has stolen from you, someone has robbed you, someone has raped you, someone has violated your trust and safety, it's not likely that you want to be in a close relationship with them ever again. And I think that that's why God says, if someone's committing adultery, that's pretty violating of your trust and safety, right? And you may not be able to be in a relationship with that person again in a close way. That doesn't mean you can't reconcile and be in their presence and wish them well and hope for their best and like go to a wedding that they're present and not feel scared and all that because they don't have access to you. But when they have access to you, to your finances, to your body, to your health, and they've shown a track record of harming you, I don't know that God is asking you to put yourself in a vulnerable place again with those people. Sometimes consequences of sin are permanent. When you are reckless and you drive and you kill a kid, you can be as truly repentant as can be, and God doesn't raise that kid up from the dead so that you don't have to go to jail or that you don't feel bad. You have to live with those consequences sometimes, and sometimes the consequences are the loss of a close relationship with someone because you violated trust and safety in a pretty significant way. I hope that answers your question, Colleen, at least in a general way. We can get into more details at the workshop. So this is our public Facebook page, and we just want to make sure that you're safe as you ask the questions. We have someone speaking in a foreign language. We can't translate that here, but I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you can understand English. And we will see you. I think we're on tomorrow. I think I'm on by myself tomorrow. What are we talking about? Let me just look.
I think you're talking about staying well tomorrow.
Yes. All right. So what does it look like to stay well? So this is your question, Colleen. Do I reconcile and try to stay well? What does that look like in a relationship? And what does true reconciliation look like? All right. And so we're going to kind of unpack that because sometimes you can reconcile, or sometimes you're not really reconciled and you don't really feel all that safe for some reasons, but you're staying for the kiddos because you don't want them to be unsafe. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit more tomorrow. Same, not this time, 9:00 my time, 12:00 Eastern time. And I'll be on my lonesome tomorrow talking about staying well. So I hope you join me tomorrow. Thanks so much, LeAnne. And you're going to go to Bible study. I'm going to get off my rear end and move around a little bit because I have been sitting for 8 hours and I need to get up and moving. So thanks a lot, everyone. We're so glad to see you here, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, take care. God bless. Bye-bye.